There is a brand new series on Prime Video, which is from the makers of Gilmore Girls and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. This one takes something of a different turn. It is actually about the world of ballet. It's called Étoile. And it is everything you would imagine a show to be if it was from the creators of the Gilmore Girls and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. It is lightning fast, walking and talking, plenty of banter, lots of soap opera shenanigans. Only this one is set in the high-powered world of professional ballet. So a New York ballet company and a French ballet company decide that to save themselves and save the art, they're going to swap members and swap principals. And that's where the conflict happens and the drama ensues. I will say right off the bat that this isn't quite as good as Maisel or Gilmore Girls, for that matter. This is something of a spiritual successor to Bunheads, which was a show on ABC Family that Amy Sherman-Palladino did right after Gilmore Girls. It only lasted a season. It was also about a ballet dancer who ended up being a Las Vegas showgirl. It was all right, but I think coming off the greatness of the Gilmore Girls, people found it underwhelming. They didn't tune in, and it was cancelled after a season. Étoile feels like a redo of that show in some ways. It feels like she still had ideas that she wanted to explore from that show. But because it's on streaming now, it's a little more risque. It's a little more forward. It's a little more dangerous, I think, because it tries to take on a lot more ideas. It's no longer just centered on the lives of these interesting individuals with quirky pasts, right? I mean, this one has a financier who is an arms dealer but wants to spend his money on the arts. So it goes to different places.
Yes, but I feel like you're misselling the product, because I don't think Étoile is anything like Bunheads, other than the fact that they're both based in the world of ballet, right? Because Étoile, ostensibly, yes, we're following several characters, but it is less about what they do in their day-to-day. Like, we're not seeing anybody going home with anybody. We're not seeing the off-stage, air quotes, drama of being in a theater company. A lot of the shots are primarily centered within the ballet companies themselves, right?
Yes.
So it's not about them going clubbing and somebody's doing drugs and none of that bullshit. This is purely about people who love the art and want the success and the best for their art, while two characters are also worrying about the business of the art. So in that sense, it is less Maisel, it is less Bunheads, it is less Gilmore Girls, and more. It's closer to something like Mozart in the Jungle, actually, in that sense, I feel.
It is, but I think the rapid-fire dialogue, the overstuffed scripts, the kind of hyper-kinetic, almost manic narrative style is very similar to what they're known for.
That's almost very the Palladinos, right?
Exactly.
It almost feels like it's their calling card as opposed to something that this show is based on.
And for me, that's the closest I'm getting to a Sorkin drama. So I'm always in when it comes to their work. It's Sorkin light, but it still feels really, really good. And not many people can write TV in this way.
I will say, I really liked Étoile. I binged it over about 3 days.
Same.
It's only 8 episodes, but I did it over about 3 days. And I have one comment regarding their snappy New York thing. I feel like the snappy New York thing really, really worked for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. So much so that now whenever I see Rachel Brosnahan and she doesn't do the snappy New York thing, I feel really weirded out.
You're like, why are you talking like that? Come on.
Why are you talking so slowly? What is going on? Where is the pace? Yeah. However, I think it is really jarring when the Palladinos do it in Étoile, when it is set in France. When the Paris characters are talking, Charlotte Gainsborough, I feel like that thing is so New York that when the French are doing it in French, it almost doesn't work. It feels very put on.
Right.
It feels very strange, especially because, like you said, the central thesis of the series is that these two international beloved ballet companies sort of swap their leads, right? They swap their artistic director and they swap a couple of dancers.
Much against their will. They're doing it because this rich financier has said, hey, you got to do this to save yourselves, and I'm going to give you this money to do it.
Whenever the story jumps into Paris, which I love, I really like that they do it over these two cities and these two towns. The problem is the dialogue doesn't switch. The style of delivery doesn't switch. So I'm almost feeling like this is just another block in New York City, but they're just speaking in French. That's my only complaint. And again, this feels like a complaint against the Palladinos as opposed to against the actual story characters, because I love every one of these characters, from Tobias Bell's really weird, borderline autistic character to Cheyenne Toussaint, the French principal ballerina, who is this weird activist fighting for the future of the world while also being in a real hard ass when it comes to ballet, right?
The one thing the Palladinos do really, really well is character.
Yes.
Even in Maisel, even in Gilmore Girls, every side character is so memorable. And they all have their own parts to play, and they're all written incredibly well. No one feels like an afterthought. And it's the same with Étoile. It is a company, it is an ensemble that is just incredibly synergized. It is an ensemble that works so well together, and it feels so incredibly believable that they're a part of this company. Right from episode 1, because you're thrown in to the middle of the action in episode 1. There is very little introduction as to what's going on. They assume that you know an art like ballet is a difficult sell. Like, that's all you need to know going into this. And it continues to be a difficult sell, even in the highest of societies in New York and Paris. And so something needs to be done. And that's where the show starts. And I love that it happens that way. There is no origin story of your lead directors or your principals. It's kind of scattered throughout the show as a sort of mystery as you kind of discover their pasts and how they interconnect and the relationship they've had and who hates each other and who likes each other. And I love that soap opera element. Like, that kept me hooked throughout. I'm completely obsessed with the show. Like you said, it's been a long time since I've binged something, and there is something about the way these characters are written and the story is told that makes it so incredibly engaging. Now, the other thing, I don't know anything about dance, but the dance in the show looks great. Like, the dancing looks amazing. And if anyone listening is a dancer or a ballet dancer and knows something about the art, please chime in and let us know how good it is. Because as outside observers, it looks pretty incredible.
I think the problem for me is, like you, I also know next to zero about ballet or dance, that whenever they're saying like, oh, don't do it faster, I'm like, wait, that was pretty good. Right? What are you talking about? I know tempo, I know beat, but when they say like, oh, you're behind, I'm like, really? This isn't like watching that stupid Mexican kid play football in goal, where I'm like, there is no fucking way Newcastle United, let alone Real Madrid, is signing that dummy. But here I'm just like, none of it ever matters, I think. I feel like that doesn't matter because the scoring of that thing never becomes a transition point for the audience, right? It never becomes a thing where the audience understands somebody has lost because they weren't good enough.
No, you're right. And I think what's interesting about this show, in contrast to something like Maisel, is that with Maisel, her comedy needed to be funny. The jokes needed to be good because you needed to believe that she was a great stand-up. And if her jokes weren't good, you would be like, well, everyone in the show thinks she's good, but we're not finding it funny. And that just doesn't work, right?
It's that problem we have when someone says, oh, this is the best music you've ever heard, and then the song comes out and you go like, meh, meh, that's kind of lame.
But with Étoile, the dancing is there and the dancing is in the background, but it's the character and the narrative that drives everything else. And so I think the dancing is good enough that it doesn't need to be the best ballet you've ever seen in your life. Maybe if a ballet dancer was watching this, they'd be like, well, what is this Cheyenne person doing? How is she supposed to be great? I don't get it. Maybe. But for the rest of us, that feels like it's enough. And it carries the show and it serves as a solid foundation to what's going on. So in that sense, I think the Palladinos have kind of balanced all of the elements of the show very, very well.
It's because they never devolve into inside baseball. They understand that the audience isn't going to be a ballet nerd. And I love that. I love that they're really working very hard to bring you in. There's the thing with the little girl named Susu. And that's almost like you are almost seeing the birth of
a future ballet dancer.
Yeah, right. This is where they start. And I like that. I like that we also see the sort of middle ground of that, which is, I can't remember her name, but she's the principal dancer that gets sent to Paris from New York. She's sort of at that point where she can just on the cusp of breaking into prima ballerina potentially, right?
Yeah.
So you're seeing these different levels of the life cycle of a dancer. And I think the Palladinos are writing for you and I, people who know ballet. We recognize it as an art form, but don't know enough about it to speak with any authority, I guess.
I miss shows like this. I like shows that kind of delve into like a really specific art form, like the nitty-gritty of a specific art form, and use it as the backdrop for drama. It's what we loved about The West Wing, about Studio 60. It's all about that setting, right? And how the setting is used to grow out this human drama. Sure, The West Wing was about politics, and it was about the presidency, but the exciting stuff was also the interpersonal relationships between Charlie and CJ and Sam and Josh and all of that stuff.
I like that there are shows like this that treat the audience as adults, that we're not just here for
the seedy, sordid stuff.
Yeah, the CW shit. I feel like if you like well-written shows with well-rounded, created characters, I think Étoile is for you.
Also, if you're a fan of the Palladinos, if you like all their previous stuff, if you like Gilmore Girls, if you like Maisel, if you liked Bunheads, this is their signature trademark style.
And it's not heavy. It's a dramedy, but it never gets into melodrama.
It's super entertaining.
It is fun.
It's interesting. It's funny. It's dramatic. It's emotional. But
like when the character Crispin, he's the British oil baron that you mentioned earlier, that's potentially also maybe an arms dealer. When he first comes on screen, I felt like, oh, maybe this guy's too much of a caricature of a villain. But he isn't. He never gets treated that way.
Also, as the character grows, and it happens to all of the characters, right? When you meet them, they feel or they begin as caricatures. He is the caricature of a billionaire. He is the caricature of a ballet director. And then as the episodes develop and the characters gain depth, they suddenly become a lot more and something different from what you expect.
That was perfect. They gain depth. Over the course of 8 episodes, all these characters gain depth. When you first see Cheyenne, she's this activist on a Greenpeace-style boat threatening a fishing trawler with oranges, right?
Where are the torpedoes? What do you mean you don't have torpedoes?
What do you mean you don't have torpedoes? And then she gets carted away by the police, and before she does, one of the police officers like, my wife loves you, can I take a photo? It's silly, but it never trips into caricature. It never trips into stupid territory. This is just a little aside to tell you where these characters' heads are at. And then you get and gain depth with these characters.
We highly recommend Étoile. It is now streaming on Prime Video. Check it out. All the episodes have dropped. Let us know what you think once you've seen it. You know how to reach out. We're on Instagram on Goggler MY. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.